There is a sound the universe makes when someone finally stops running from their own abundance. It is not loud. It does not announce itself with trumpets or earthquakes. It arrives like the first breath after a long, unconscious suffocation, quiet, complete, and so obvious you will wonder how you missed it for so long. That sound is available to you right now. Not tomorrow. Not after you fix your credit score, not after the promotion, not after the relationship settles into something stable. Right now, in this breath, in this moment, as these words move through you, the channel is open, and the question is only whether you are willing to receive what has always been prepared for you. I know what it feels like to stand at the edge of everything you want and still feel like it belongs to someone else. I know the specific exhaustion of working harder than everyone around you and watching the harvest arrive at their door while yours stays dry and silent. That particular pain has a texture to it. It is not just financial, it is existential. It cuts at the part of you that wonders if the universe has a list and your name simply isn't on it. But what if I told you the list was never the problem? What if the real issue was something so fundamental, so baked into the way you perceive yourself and your world, that no amount of hustle or strategy or positive thinking could ever reach it from the outside? What I am about to share with you is not motivational content. I want to be very clear about that from the beginning. Motivation fades. You have felt it fade 100 times before, the electric high of a seminar or a book that dissolves by Tuesday morning. What we are building together in this space is something structural, something that changes the architecture of how you relate to wealth, to flow, to the energetic current that ancient civilizations called by 1,000 sacred names and that modern quantum science is only now beginning to describe in the language of particles and probability fields. This is not inspiration. This is a rewiring. Before we go further, I want you to do one thing. Place your hand over the center of your chest. Not performatively, actually feel the warmth of your own palm, the steady rhythm underneath it. That rhythm is not accidental. Every beat is a declaration that you are here, that you are alive, that the universe has kept you breathing through every storm that tried to convince you that lack was your permanent address. Abundance does not begin in the bank account. It does not begin in the business plan or the investment portfolio. It begins exactly where your hand is resting right now, in the electromagnetic field of a heart that is either open or armored, either receiving or deflecting, either aligned with the infinite ocean of divine supply or dammed up by decades of inherited fear. The first thing I need you to understand, and this is the piece that most teachers skip because it is uncomfortable, is that wealth is not primarily a material phenomenon. The money, the resources, the opportunities that seem to flow so effortlessly toward certain people and so stubbornly away from others are not random. They are not the result of luck or privilege or even exceptional skill, though all of those play their roles. At the most fundamental level, what determines the quality of financial reality in your life is a frequency. A specific, measurable, trainable vibration that either matches the energetic signature of abundance or repels it the way opposing magnets push away from each other, invisibly, irresistibly, regardless of how desperately you try to force them together. This is not metaphor. Or rather, it is metaphor, but it is also physics. When we talk about frequency in this context, we are talking about the dominant emotional and neurological state that your nervous system operates from on a day-to-day basis. Your body is not a passive machine. It is a transmitter. Every thought you think, every emotion you carry in your chest, every story you repeat to yourself in the quiet hours before sleep, all of it produces a measurable electromagnetic output that interacts with the field around you in ways that are beginning to be documented by researchers at institutions that would have laughed at this conversation 30 years ago. The Heart Math Institute has published data showing that the human heart generates an electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond the body. That field is not neutral. It carries information. It carries the emotional signature of whoever is generating it. Now ask yourself honestly, and this requires courage, what emotional signature are you broadcasting most consistently? Not on your best days, not in the peak moments of prayer or meditation or gratitude practice. I mean on the ordinary Tuesday. On the morning when the bill arrives and the account is lower than expected. On the afternoon when a colleague gets the recognition you deserved. In those unguarded moments, what frequency are your body, your heart, your nervous system emitting into the field around you? Because that frequency, not your intentions, not your affirmations, not your vision board, that baseline frequency is what the universe responds to. It is matching you to experiences, people, and circumstances that resonate with whatever you are actually transmitting, not whatever you wish you were transmitting. This is why so many people who are genuinely trying, who are doing all the right things on the surface, still find themselves cycling through the same financial patterns year after year. The affirmation is one thing, but the subconscious frequency underneath the affirmation is something else entirely. You can say, "I am abundant" 1,000 times while your nervous system is screaming, "I am terrified," and the field will always respond to the deeper signal. The ancient teachers understood this. The Hermetic traditions described it as the law of vibration, the understanding that nothing rests, everything moves, and what you are in motion toward is determined by the rate at which you are oscillating. The mystics of nearly every tradition found different languages for the same underlying truth, that your inner state is the master architect of your outer reality, not the other way around. Here is where this gets personal. And this leads us to something I want you to hold in the back of your mind as we move forward. A question that we will fully unlock together as this journey deepens. The question is this: what was the first story you were ever told about money? Not a philosophy, not a lesson from a book. I mean the lived experience, the tension you felt at the dinner table when finances were discussed, the way your parents' bodies changed when bills arrived, the unspoken understanding in your household about whether people like you were meant to be comfortable or perpetually struggling. That story is still running. It has been running for decades underneath every financial decision you have ever made. And it cannot be overwritten by willpower alone. This is why the frequency work is not optional. It is not supplementary to the practical steps. It is foundational to them. You can have the best financial strategy in the world, the most disciplined savings habit, the most refined investment knowledge, and still watch it underperform relative to someone with half your technical skill but twice your energetic alignment. I have watched this happen. I have lived a version of this. There was a period in my own life when I was doing everything correctly by external standards and still felt like I was swimming upstream in a current that never tired. The work I am about to share with you is what changed that, not overnight, not in a single revelation, but progressively and permanently, the way a river changes the shape of a canyon, invisibly in any given moment, unmistakably over time. The frequency of prosperity has specific characteristics that I want to name clearly so you can begin to orient toward them. It is not the frequency of desperation, even when desperation feels like motivation. It is not the frequency of competition, of watching what others have and measuring your supply against their abundance. It is not even the frequency of want, the sharp, focused hunger for more, because want, however understandable, still carries within it the acknowledgement of lack, and lack is the signal that creates more of itself. The frequency of true, sustainable quantum prosperity feels, and I'm going to ask you to feel this as I describe it, not just understand it intellectually, it feels like expansion in the chest. It feels like the particular quality of light on a late afternoon when everything is, for a moment, enough. It feels like a deep, unhurried certainty that the harvest is already growing even though the ground above it looks bare. It is sovereign. It is ancient. It is already in you. Your assignment between now and the next chapter is deceptively simple and profoundly challenging. For the next 24 hours, I want you to become a scientist of your own frequency. Not a judge, a scientist. Notice, without criticism, what emotional state your body defaults to when the subject of money arises. Notice the tightening, the holding, the subtle contraction that most of us have normalized to the point of invisibility. Write it down if you need to. Give it a name. Because you cannot change what you have not identified, and the path to your sovereign abundance runs directly through the center of whatever you discover in that honest observation. We are just beginning. The architecture of what I am going to build with you goes much deeper than this opening. And as we move into the second chapter, we will do something that most teachers in this space deliberately avoid because it requires real courage from both the teacher and the student. We are going to go into the wound. Not to live there, we will not be staying long. But because the only way to build on ground that holds is to clear the old foundation first. And what you find there, I promise you, will not destroy you. It will be the very thing that sets you free. Nobody talks about this part. The teachers who sell the dream of effortless abundance, the voices that promise you a new reality if you simply think differently and vibrate higher, almost none of them will take you into this room. Because this room is uncomfortable. It does not photograph well. It does not make for a clean, shareable quote on a gold background. But I am telling you, with every ounce of conviction I have earned through my own excavation of this territory, you cannot build a sovereign financial reality on top of unexamined pain. The structure will not hold. It never holds. And the reason so many people experience temporary breakthroughs followed by devastating collapses, the reason the money comes and then disappears with a speed that feels almost personal, is that the foundation beneath the manifestation was never cleared. So we are going in. And I want you to take a breath before we do. Because what I am about to describe is not someone else's story. It is yours. It is mine. It is the story of virtually every human being who grew up in a world where scarcity was either a reality or a constant threat, where the adults around them were themselves carrying wounds about worthiness and resource and the particular cruelty of wanting something you believe you are not allowed to have. The wound before the wealth is not a wound of poverty, necessarily. I have met people who grew up in material comfort who carry it just as deeply as those who grew up without. It is a wound of identity, a deep, cellular-level recording that says, "Abundance is not safe for someone like me." Let me describe what this wound looks and feels like in practice, because naming it precisely is half the work of dissolving it. It shows up as the inexplicable guilt that arrives when money does come, the compulsive need to spend it quickly, give it away, or self-sabotage the opportunity that generated it before it can become permanent. It shows up as the hypervigilance around finances, the obsessive checking of accounts, the inability to feel safe even when the numbers are technically fine, because safety was never really about the numbers to begin with. It shows up as the deeply uncomfortable sensation that arises when someone else describes their abundance, that particular cocktail of admiration and resentment and shame about the resentment that most of us have never spoken aloud to another living person. These are not character flaws. They are the logical, predictable responses of a nervous system that learned, at a very young age, that money meant danger, conflict, inadequacy, or loss. The science of this is extraordinary and heartbreaking in equal measure. Researchers in the field of epigenetics, the study of how environment and experience alter the expression of our genes, have documented that trauma responses can be passed down through generations in ways that do not require direct experience. Your grandparents' relationship with scarcity, the fear they carried in their bodies during periods of genuine survival-level deprivation, can leave a biological imprint that expresses itself in your nervous system decades later as an inexplicable anxiety around financial flow. You did not choose this inheritance. You did not earn it. It arrived in your cellular memory the way eye color arrives, silently, before you had any say in the matter. And understanding this, truly understanding it, not just intellectually but with the compassion of someone who knows it is not their fault, is the first act of liberation. I want to guide you through something right now. Close your eyes if you are in a space where that is safe. I want you to think back, not with analysis, with sensation, to the earliest memory you have that carries an emotional charge around the concept of not having enough. It does not need to be dramatic. Sometimes it is as quiet as overhearing a conversation through a wall, the specific tone in a parent's voice when they said a number out loud and the air in the room changed. Sometimes it is the memory of wanting something and feeling the weight of the answer before it was spoken. Whatever arrives, let it be there without pushing it away or rushing past it. Feel where in your body that memory lives. Most people find it in the solar plexus, that space just below the sternum where the body holds its oldest recordings of threat and inadequacy. Place your hand there. Not to fix it, just to acknowledge it. You are telling your nervous system something it may never have heard before. I see you. I know you were trying to protect me, and I am ready to lead from somewhere new. This is the moment most people skip. This is the moment the productivity culture tells you to bypass in favor of action steps and morning routines and the relentless forward momentum that keeps you too busy to feel anything inconvenient. But skipping this moment is precisely why the cycles repeat. The subconscious mind does not respond to strategy. It responds to completion. When an emotional loop is opened, when a wound is sustained and never properly witnessed, the nervous system keeps returning to it, keeps organizing your behavior around it, keeps generating the same external circumstances as a way of trying, hopelessly, to resolve the original pain through repetition. Psychologists call this the repetition compulsion. Spiritual traditions call it karma, or the unfinished lesson. Whatever name you prefer, the mechanism is the same. The wound pulls the future toward itself until it is finally, honestly, compassionately seen. And this leads us directly to the secret I mentioned at the opening of our time together, the piece that unlocks everything that follows. The secret is this: prosperity is not something you attract from the outside. It is something you unblock from the inside. The infinite ocean of divine supply is not withholding from you. The universe is not punishing you, testing you, or waiting for you to earn its generosity through sufficient suffering. The flow is constant. It has always been constant. What changes is not the availability of the resource but the permeability of the vessel. And the wound, this ancient, inherited, deeply personal wound around worthiness and safety and the right to receive, is what has been making you impermeable. Not completely, never completely, but enough. Enough to deflect the golden rain at the last moment, to unconsciously close the door just as opportunity reaches the threshold, to generate the precise circumstances that confirm the oldest story. Here is what I know to be true from the other side of this excavation. The moment you stop treating the wound as an obstacle to your abundance and start treating it as the very portal through which your abundance must travel, everything changes. The pain you have been managing, suppressing, spiritually bypassing your way around for years becomes the fuel, becomes the depth, becomes the reason your prosperity, when it arrives, is not fragile or performative but rooted in something unshakable, because it was built on the honest ground of a self that has been truly, completely met. The people who carry the greatest wounds and do the work of facing them honestly do not become slightly more abundant. They become unstoppable. I have seen it. I have lived it. And I am watching you step into it right now. Before we move forward, I want to offer you something practical, because the emotional depth of what we have just covered deserves a concrete anchor. Tonight, not next week, tonight, I want you to write a letter. Not to send, just to write. Address it to the version of you who first learned that abundance was dangerous or unavailable or reserved for others. Write to that child, that teenager, that young adult who absorbed the wound before they had the language or the power to question it. Tell them what you now know. Tell them that the story was not the truth, it was the fear speaking. Tell them that you are here, that you survived, that the ground is different now. You do not need to feel certain of any of this when you write it. The writing itself is the act of reprogramming. The nervous system does not distinguish between a memory and a vividly imagined experience. You are literally creating a new recording in the same cellular archive where the old wound lives. We have done real work in this chapter. Harder work than most people are willing to do. And the reason I pushed you into this territory so early is that everything that comes next, the quantum architecture, the sovereign identity, the sacred reprogramming, the ancient protocols for sustaining the frequency of infinite flow, all of it rests on the foundation we have just begun to clear. You are not the same as you were at the beginning of this chapter. Something has shifted, even if you cannot name it yet. The body knows before the mind catches up. Trust the warmth, the slight loosening in the chest, the quiet sense that something long held is beginning, finally, to move. I want to start this chapter with a statement that will either land as the most liberating thing you have heard in years or the most unsettling, and honestly, if it does both simultaneously, that is exactly the right response. Here it is. The reality you are currently living is not the only reality available to you. It is not even the most likely reality, statistically speaking, given the full spectrum of what is possible within the field of your life. It is simply the reality that your current frequency has been selecting automatically, continuously, with the precision of a tuning fork that only vibrates at the note it was built to produce. Change the fork and you change the note. Change the note, and you change everything the note calls toward it. This is not wishful thinking. This is the language of quantum mechanics applied to lived human experience, and the bridge between those two things is narrower than most people imagine. The foundational discovery of quantum physics, the one that Einstein famously called spooky action at a distance, and spent years trying to disprove because its implications were too radical for even his extraordinary mind to fully accept, is that at the subatomic level, reality does not exist in a fixed state until it is observed. Particles exist in a superposition of all possible states simultaneously, and the act of measurement, of conscious attention directed at the system, collapses that superposition into a single, specific outcome. The observer does not passively watch reality. The observer participates in its creation. If that is true at the level of particles, and the experimental evidence is now overwhelming that it is, then what does it mean for the level of experience, of circumstance, of the daily material texture of a human life? It means that your attention is not a passive receptor. It is a creative force. The sustained, emotionally charged direction of your consciousness is literally participating in the selection of which probability wave collapses into your lived experience. This is what the ancient wisdom traditions were pointing at when they spoke of prayer, of visualization, of the creative power of focused intention. They did not have the language of quantum superposition, but they had the lived, verified, transmitted understanding that something extraordinary happens when human consciousness is brought into coherent, emotionally resonant focus on a specific desired reality. The harvest of the soul is not metaphysical fantasy. It is the oldest description of a mechanism that physics has only recently begun to formalize. Now, here is where the architecture becomes specific, because it is not enough to simply want something or to think about it occasionally with mild hope. The quantum field responds to coherence, to the alignment between the conscious intention and the deeper emotional frequency we discussed in the previous chapters. A prayer spoken from a place of genuine worthiness, genuine felt certainty of receiving, generates a completely different signal than the same words spoken from a place of desperate supplication. Both are prayers. Both are directed at the same outcome. But they carry different emotional signatures, different vibrational architectures, and therefore they interact with the field of possibility in fundamentally different ways. One is a request from someone who already knows the answer is yes. The other is a plea from someone who is not sure they deserve an answer at all. I want to build a structure in your mind right now that you can return to every time you engage in any practice of intention, whether that is visualization, affirmation, prayer, or simple directed thought. I call it the quantum architecture of abundance, and it has 3 interlocking chambers that must all be engaged simultaneously for the signal to be coherent enough to produce consistent results. The first chamber is clarity, not a vague wish for more, but a specific, sensory-rich, emotionally inhabited picture of the reality you are selecting. Not, I want financial freedom, but the exact texture of what financial freedom feels like in your body on an ordinary morning. The quality of the light through the window, the absence of the tightening in your chest that used to accompany the thought of checking your account, the particular ease with which you move through your day when the energetic weight of financial fear has been lifted from your nervous system. Clarity is not about the numbers. It is about the felt experience that the numbers represent. The second chamber is certainty, and this is the one that requires the wound work we did in the previous chapter, which is precisely why I insisted we go there first. Certainty is the emotional state of someone who is not hoping for an outcome but expecting it, the way you expect the sun to rise, the way you expect your heart to continue beating. It is not arrogance. It is not the performative confidence of someone overcompensating for deep doubt. It is the quiet, grounded, almost unremarkable assurance of a person who has made peace with their own worthiness and therefore no longer needs to negotiate with the universe for permission to receive. Building certainty is a practice, not a destination, and the single most effective way to accelerate it is to actively recall every moment in your past when what seemed impossible arrived anyway, when the supply came from an unexpected direction, when the door you had given up on opened without your forcing it. Your history of receiving is more extensive than your fear remembers. Mine is. Yours is too. The third chamber is surrender, and this is perhaps the most misunderstood element in all of manifestation and prosperity teaching. Surrender does not mean passivity. It does not mean doing nothing and waiting for abundance to arrive on your doorstep like an unordered package. Surrender is the act of releasing your attachment to the specific mechanism through which the abundance must arrive. The ego, brilliant, protective, deeply limited, has a very particular idea of what the path to prosperity is supposed to look like. It needs to be linear, logical, controllable, legible within its existing map of what is possible. But the quantum field is not limited by your ego's map. The divine supply does not need your approval of its delivery method. Surrender is the practice of holding the clarity and the certainty while simultaneously opening your hands, releasing the grip on the how, and trusting that the intelligence that manages the trajectory of every planet in every solar system across the infinite expanse of the observable universe is also capable of managing the logistics of your financial reality without your anxious micromanagement. These 3 chambers, clarity, certainty, surrender, form the quantum architecture that transforms intention from a fragile wish into a structural force. And when all 3 are genuinely engaged, something extraordinary begins to happen in the material world. I want to describe it carefully because if you have never experienced it, it can seem like coincidence, and if you have experienced it, you know with absolute certainty that it is not. Opportunities begin to appear from directions you were not watching. People arrive in your life at precisely the right moment carrying precisely the resource or connection or knowledge you needed. Circumstances rearrange themselves around your coherent signal the way iron filings rearrange themselves around a magnet, not because magic is happening, but because the organizing principle of the field has shifted and the physical world is simply catching up to the energetic reality you have already established. This leads us to something I want you to sit with for a moment, something that may initially feel counterintuitive given how deeply we have been conditioned to associate effort with reward. The most productive thing you can do for your financial reality on any given day may not be the thing on your task list. It may be the 10 minutes you spend in the morning genuinely inhabiting the felt sense of your already abundant life, with enough sensory specificity and emotional authenticity that your nervous system cannot distinguish between that imagined reality and the present one. Because your nervous system is the transmitter, and the transmitter does not evaluate the content it broadcasts. It simply broadcasts whatever you are genuinely, physiologically, emotionally experiencing as real. Feed it the frequency of lack, and it broadcasts lack. Feed it the frequency of sovereign, unstoppable quantum prosperity, and it begins, cell by cell, synapse by synapse, to reorganize your entire way of moving through the world around that signal. I want to give you a practice that engages all three chambers simultaneously. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before the external world pours its demands into your consciousness, I want you to spend 5 minutes in what I call the field activation. Lie still, or sit quietly, and begin with clarity. Build the specific sensory picture of your abundant reality with as much detail as your imagination will allow. Feel the texture of it. Smell it if you can. Then move into certainty. Remind yourself, gently and factually, of 3 moments in your history when the supply came through, small or large, it does not matter. Let those memories warm the field from inside. And then, surrender. Take a long exhale and consciously release the grip. Say, either aloud or internally, I know it is already done. I release the how. I trust the field. 5 minutes. Every morning. Not because I am telling you to, but because what we are building in these chapters is not a theory, it is a living practice, and practices require repetition before they become architecture. And this connects to something we have not yet addressed, something that sits at the intersection of ancient knowledge and the material world in a way that will fundamentally reframe how you think about the societies and civilizations that came before us. Because the quantum understanding of abundance is not new. It is, in fact, the oldest knowledge on Earth. And the evidence of that antiquity is written in stone and ceremony across cultures that had no contact with each other, no shared language, no common trade routes, and yet arrived, independently, at the same sovereign truth about the relationship between human consciousness and material reality. That is where we are going next. And I promise you, what the ancient ones knew will not feel like history. It will feel like memory. There is a particular kind of silence that exists inside ancient stone. Not the silence of emptiness, the silence of density, of accumulated knowing, of walls that have absorbed centuries of ceremony and intention and the specific quality of human longing directed upward towards something larger than itself. I have stood in spaces like this. Most of us have felt a version of it, even in photographs, even through a screen, that inexplicable weight of a place that remembers what modern culture has almost entirely forgotten. And what those spaces remember, what was practiced inside them with a precision and a consistency that puts our contemporary spiritual dabbling to shame, is exactly what we have been building toward in these chapters. The ancient ones did not stumble onto the frequency of abundance by accident. They cultivated it deliberately, systematically, across generations, as the central organizing project of their civilizations. I want to take you to 3 specific traditions, not as a history lesson, but as a transmission. Because knowledge that has survived thousands of years of war, colonization, and cultural erasure is not ordinary knowledge. It is knowledge that proved itself strong enough to persist through every attempt to destroy it, which means it carries a particular authority that no contemporary self-help framework, however sophisticated, can claim. These traditions did not agree on theology. They did not share geography or language or cosmology, but on the fundamental mechanics of prosperity consciousness, on the relationship between inner frequency and outer harvest. They were speaking the same language in different dialects, and that convergence is not coincidence. It is confirmation. The first tradition I want to bring into this space is the Kemetic, the spiritual and philosophical system of ancient Egypt, one of the longest sustained civilizations in human history, whose understanding of consciousness and material reality was so precise that it continues to perplex modern scholars who cannot account for the sophistication of its outputs with the tools they assume were available. The Kemetic teachers spoke of a principle they called ma'at, often translated as truth, justice, or cosmic order, but which more accurately describes the fundamental harmonic of the universe, the frequency at which creation operates when nothing is blocking its natural flow. To live in Ma'at was not a moral instruction in the way we moderns understand morality. It was a vibrational prescription. It meant aligning your inner state, your thoughts, your emotional field, your energetic signature with the organizing frequency of the cosmos itself. And the Kemetic understanding was unambiguous. A life lived in that alignment would naturally, inevitably produce abundance, health, harmonious relationships, and creative power. Not as reward, as resonance. The second tradition arrives from the other side of the world and several millennia later, though its roots reach back further than its written record. The Vedic tradition of ancient India, from which yoga, Ayurveda, and much of modern meditation practice descend, developed perhaps the most sophisticated map of the relationship between consciousness and material reality that any civilization has ever produced. The concept of Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth and prosperity in the Hindu pantheon, is so frequently misunderstood in the West as a simple symbol of good fortune, a lucky charm, a deity to petition for material gain. But the original Vedic understanding of Lakshmi was far more precise and far more demanding than that. Lakshmi was understood as the energetic quality of aligned receptivity, the state of a consciousness that has made itself beautiful from the inside, that has cleared the debris of fear and grasping and unworthiness, and in doing so has become naturally, effortlessly magnetic to the flow of divine supply. The ancient Vedic teachers were not praying to Lakshmi for money. They were cultivating Lakshmi as a frequency within themselves. The prosperity was the side effect of the inner transformation, not the goal that the inner transformation was serving. The third tradition I want to bring here is perhaps the one closest to the hearts of many who are watching this, the mystical Christian tradition, particularly as expressed through the teachings of the Desert Fathers and the medieval mystics, whose understanding of divine abundance was far more radical and practical than the sanitized version that tends to survive in mainstream religious culture. Meister Eckhart, the 14th-century German theologian whose writings were so threatening to the established church that they were condemned after his death, wrote extensively about what he called the ground of the soul, the deepest interior space of a human being, where, he argued, the distinction between the individual and the divine source simply does not exist. From that ground, he taught, all things flow naturally and without obstruction. The impediment to divine supply, in Eckhart's framework, was not sin in the conventional sense but attachment, the grasping, fearful clinging to outcomes and identities and stories about what we deserve that prevents the deeper flow from moving through us. God is a great underground river. One of his most famous passages suggests, not begging to be reached, not withholding until conditions are met, but perpetually flowing, perpetually available, perpetually abundant beneath whatever surface conditions appear dry and barren. These three traditions, separated by geography, language, theology, and thousands of years, are describing the same mechanism in different poetic vocabularies. And the mechanism is this: abundance is the natural state of an aligned consciousness. Scarcity is not the universe's default setting. It is the output of a specific inner configuration, a nervous system organized around fear, a self-concept built on unworthiness, an energetic field broadcasting the frequency of lack. The ancient civilizations that built monuments we still cannot fully explain, that sustained complex societies across centuries without the technological infrastructure we consider essential, were not doing so through superior material resources. They were doing so through superior consciousness technology, refined, transmitted, rigorously practiced frameworks for maintaining the inner alignment that allowed the outer harvest to flow consistently and abundantly. Now I want to bring this into your body, because this information should not remain in your head. It is too important, too ancient, too hard-won to be processed as intellectual content and filed away. I want you to feel the weight of what I am describing, the sheer, staggering continuity of this knowing across human history. Every single one of your ancestors, somewhere in the long chain of lives that produced yours, participated in a tradition that understood the sacred relationship between inner state and outer abundance. Every single one. Whether they accessed it through the ceremony of an ancient temple, the silence of a monastic cell, the rhythmic chant of a communal gathering, or the private, unwitnessed prayer of an ordinary person in an ordinary room, they knew, in the marrow of the culture that shaped them, that the inner world was primary and the outer world was responsive. That knowing is in you. It is not something you need to acquire. It is something you need to remember. The practice of remembering is itself a quantum act. When you deliberately connect your personal intention with the accumulated intentional force of every human being across every civilization who ever directed their consciousness toward the frequency of prosperity, you are not engaging in nostalgia or romanticism. You are plugging into a current. You are adding your voltage to a circuit that has been running for millennia. The ancient ones did not complete this work and put it away. They passed it forward, through texts and temples and transmitted lineages and the cellular memory encoded in every human body that descends from a culture that once understood what we are in the process of rediscovering together. You are not starting from scratch. You are picking up a thread. Here is something I want you to do with this understanding before we move forward. I want you to identify one practice from any tradition, your own ancestral one if you know it, or any that calls to you, that involves the deliberate, embodied cultivation of gratitude and receptivity. Not analysis of the tradition, not research into its history. A practice. A ritual, however small. The lighting of a candle before a moment of intentional prayer. The practice of eating the first meal of the day in conscious acknowledgement of the supply that provided it. The ancient Kemetic practice of beginning the day by stating aloud, to no one and to everything simultaneously, your alignment with the harmonics of the universe. It does not need to be elaborate. The ancient ones understood that consistency of practice mattered more than grandeur of gesture, that the daily, undramatic, repeated act of alignment built a momentum in the energetic field that no single peak experience could match. What the ancient ones knew, and what we are reclaiming together in this space, is not lost. It was never lost, not entirely. It was compressed, obscured, sometimes deliberately buried beneath centuries of a worldview that served the interests of those who benefited from a population that believed in its own scarcity. But compressed is not destroyed. And there is something happening right now. Something I feel in the quality of conversations like this one, in the hunger that draws people toward this kind of deep, structurally serious engagement with the mechanics of consciousness and prosperity, that feels less like a trend and more like a retrieval. A civilization-scale remembering of what we have always known, surfacing now because the moment requires it. And what comes next in our journey is perhaps the most personally confrontational chapter of everything we are building together. Because we have talked about frequency, about wounds, about quantum architecture, about ancient wisdom, and all of it points toward a single, unavoidable destination. The version of you that carries all of this knowledge into a lived, embodied, unstoppable reality. Not a concept, not an aspiration, the actual, specific, sovereign identity that is waiting for you on the other side of the decision we have been building toward since the first breath of this journey. That is where we are going. And I will warn you now, it will require you to let go of something you have been carrying so long you may have forgotten it does not belong to you. There is a version of you that has never doubted its right to abundance. I need you to hear that not as inspiration but as fact. Before the first wound was sustained, before the first story about scarcity was absorbed into your nervous system, before the world began its long, patient work of convincing you that your desires were too large and your worthiness too small, there was a version of you that existed in complete, unquestioned alignment with the flow of divine supply. Not naive, not childishly unaware of how the world works. Sovereign, rooted in a knowing so deep it did not require external confirmation, so stable it did not collapse under the weight of circumstance, so ancient it predates the particular lifetime in which you are currently reading these words. That version of you is not gone. It has never been gone. It has been waiting, with the patience of something that exists outside of time, for you to stop looking for it in the wrong places and simply turn around. The concept of sovereign identity is not a motivational construct. It is a precise energetic description of a specific internal configuration, the state of a self that has fully claimed its authority over its own frequency, its own narrative, its own relationship with the field of possibility. Sovereignty does not mean the absence of challenge or difficulty. It does not mean that external circumstances will never test you or that the path will always be smooth. What it means is that your fundamental orientation toward yourself and toward reality is no longer determined by what is happening around you. The sovereign self is not reactive. It is not a leaf in someone else's current. It is the current. It sets the tone of the field it occupies rather than absorbing the tone of the field it enters. And the difference between living from sovereignty and living from the wounded, conditioned, frequency-depleted self we have been excavating in these chapters is not a difference of degree. It is a difference of kind. I want to be honest with you about something that the prosperity teaching space rarely addresses with the directness it deserves. Stepping into your sovereign identity is not comfortable, at least not initially. It requires a confrontation with every relationship, every environment, every internal narrative that has been organized around the smaller version of you. The people in your life who are accustomed to your limitation will not always celebrate your expansion. The internal voice that has been keeping you safe through self-diminishment will not surrender its post without resistance. The identity that you have built across decades of navigating a world that did not always affirm your worth is not going to dissolve gracefully simply because you have intellectually understood that it was never really you. Sovereignty is claimed. It is not given, and it is not stumbled into by accident. It is the result of a decision, a specific, deliberate, irreversible turning toward yourself with the full force of your own recognition. Let me describe what the sovereign identity actually feels like from the inside, because feeling it, even briefly, even approximately, is more instructive than any description I can offer from the outside. Think of a moment in your life when you were completely in your element. Not necessarily a peak achievement, not necessarily a moment of external recognition or material success. A moment when you were so fully present in what you were doing, so completely aligned between your inner capacity and your outer expression, that the usual background noise of self-doubt and performance anxiety simply was not there. Athletes call it the zone. Musicians call it flow. Mystics call it grace. It might have lasted 30 seconds or 3 hours, but you know the quality I am pointing at, that particular clarity, that effortless authority, that sense of being exactly the right size for the space you are occupying. That was your sovereign self. Not performing, not striving, simply being what it is, without apology or contraction. Now here is the piece that changes everything. That state was not produced by the external circumstances of that moment. The circumstances were favorable, perhaps, but the state itself, that expansive, grounded, effortlessly capable state, was generated entirely from within you, which means it is available without the favorable circumstances, which means it does not require the promotion, the relationship, the bank balance, the recognition to arrive before it can be accessed. The sovereign identity does not wait for permission from the material world. It generates its own permission from the inside, and the material world reorganizes itself around that generation with the same reliable elegance that the quantum field has always demonstrated when a coherent, certain, surrendered signal is broadcast into it. This is where I want to introduce something I call the identity gap, the distance between the self you are currently living as and the sovereign self that is your actual nature. Most people are not aware of this gap as a gap. They experience it as reality, as the accurate description of who they are and what they are capable of and what the universe is likely to provide for them. They have inhabited the conditioned identity for so long that its limitations feel like facts rather than choices. The identity gap shows up in the language you use about yourself when no one is listening. It shows up in the ceiling you place on your own aspirations before you even articulate them, the automatic editing process that trims your desires down to a size your wounded self believes it can safely want without the pain of disappointment. It shows up in the way you unconsciously make yourself smaller in rooms where large energy feels dangerous, in the habit of prefacing your own ideas with disclaimers, in the reflexive deflection of compliments, in the subtle but devastating practice of agreeing with every narrative of limitation that the world has ever offered about people in your circumstances. Closing the identity gap is the central work of sovereign abundance. And I want to give you the most powerful tool I know for beginning that process right now, in this moment, without waiting for any external condition to change. It is a practice I call the sovereign statement. Not an affirmation in the conventional sense, because conventional affirmations are spoken from the current identity toward the desired one, which means they carry within them the implicit acknowledgement of the distance between the two. The sovereign statement is spoken from the desired identity as its natural, unquestioned home. It is not, "I am becoming wealthy." It is, "I am the energy through which wealth moves." It is not, "I am working toward financial freedom." It is, "Financial freedom is the natural expression of who I am." Feel the difference in your body as you read those two versions. The first carries a reaching quality, a future orientation, an implicit acknowledgement that the thing is not yet here. The second carries a settledness, a rootedness, a quality of someone reporting a fact about themselves rather than making a wish. The nervous system, as we established in earlier chapters, cannot distinguish between a vividly inhabited inner reality and an outer one. When you speak the sovereign statement with enough emotional authenticity, when you inhabit it rather than reciting it, you are creating a neurological event that begins, at the cellular level, to rewrite the identity architecture. Not instantly, not in a single repetition, but with the accumulated force of consistent practice, the same way the ancient civilizations built their monuments. One precisely placed stone at a time, with a clarity of vision about the final form that never wavered regardless of how incomplete the structure looked in any given moment. I want to give you something specific to work with here, and I want you to notice what happens in your body as you read it. Not evaluate it, notice it. The sensations in your chest, your throat, your solar plexus are more informative than your analytical mind in this moment. Here is the sovereign statement I want you to begin working with. I am a sovereign being of infinite creative capacity, and the abundance of this universe flows toward me, through me, and from me with the same effortless certainty with which light fills every space that is open to receive it. Read it again. Slower this time. Let each phrase land in the body before moving to the next. Notice where there is resistance, the places where the conditioned identity pushes back, where the internal voice says, "That is not true," or "That sounds arrogant," or "Who do you think you are?" Those resistance points are not evidence that the statement is false. They are the map of exactly where the wound work needs to continue. Every place the sovereign statement meets internal resistance is a place where the identity gap is still active, still organizing your frequency around the old story. Here is what I know about the people who fully commit to this work, who do not dabble at the edges of sovereign identity but actually cross the threshold into living from it consistently. Their external reality does not change overnight. I want to be honest about that, because anything less would be disrespectful to the genuine intelligence you bring to this process. What changes first is not the bank account or the business opportunity or the relationship or whatever specific form your desired abundance takes. What changes first is the quality of your own presence, the way you move through rooms, the way you speak about yourself and your work, the way you respond to setbacks, the speed with which you recover from circumstances that used to flatten you for weeks. People around you will notice this change before you do. They will describe you differently. They will bring different opportunities to you, not because the opportunities themselves have changed, but because your signal has changed and you are now visible to a completely different category of possibility that was always present in your field but could not previously locate you through the noise of the conditioned frequency. And then, sometimes gradually, sometimes with the sudden, breathtaking quality of a dam releasing, the material reality begins to shift. The resources appear. The connections arrive. The ideas surface with a clarity and a timing that feels less like coincidence and more like choreography. The golden rain does not fall on a life you have been desperately building from the outside in. It falls on an identity you have finally, fully, courageously claimed from the inside out. This is the harvest of the soul. This is what the ancient ones built their temples to. This is what the quantum field has been patiently waiting to reflect back to you since before you had language for what you wanted. And you are standing at the edge of it right now, not as a distant future possibility but as the next breath, the next choice, the next moment in which you decide, one more time, to live from sovereignty rather than from the wound. There is one more layer to this that we have not yet touched. Something that lives in the space between identity and expression, between who you are becoming and how that becoming speaks itself into the world. Because the sovereign self does not only think differently, it speaks differently. It uses language as a tool of creation with the same deliberate precision that an architect uses blueprints, knowing that every word is a stone, every sentence a wall, every story you tell about yourself and your relationship to abundance, either building the structure of your sovereign reality or dismantling it. And that is exactly where we are going next. Into the most underestimated, most consequential, most immediately actionable dimension of prosperity work there is. The language of wealth. The sacred, unstoppable, quantum power of the words you choose. I want you to understand something about the mind before we go any further into this chapter, something that will reframe every practice, every technique, every protocol we are about to engage with together. The subconscious mind, that vast, wordless, enormously powerful operating system running beneath the surface of your conscious awareness, does not think in abstractions. It does not respond to concepts or philosophies or even the most beautifully articulated spiritual insights. It thinks in images, in sensations, in emotionally charged experiences that it has cataloged and filed and built its entire operational architecture around. It is, in the most literal sense, a recording device, and it has been recording since before you had the cognitive capacity to evaluate what was being stored. Everything we have uncovered in the previous chapters, the wound, the inherited frequency, the identity gap, the conditioned narratives about worthiness and supply, all of it lives in this subconscious architecture, running silently and continuously beneath every conscious intention you have ever set. This is why the sacred reprogramming is not optional. It is the most structurally important work in this entire journey. You can understand the quantum field intellectually and still broadcast the frequency of lack from your subconscious. You can claim your sovereign identity consciously and still have the deeper operating system organizing your behavior around the old wound. The gap between knowing and being, between understanding prosperity as a concept and living it as a cellular, embodied, automatic reality, is bridged exclusively through the reprogramming of the subconscious. And the most powerful, most direct, most anciently validated method for doing that reprogramming is the one we are about to enter together, guided visualization so precise, so sensorially rich, so emotionally inhabited that the subconscious cannot distinguish it from lived experience, and therefore files it as memory, as evidence, as the new baseline of what is normal and expected and real. Before we begin, I want you to prepare your body. This is not a passive exercise. What we are about to do is one of the most active things a human being can engage in, because we are literally rewriting the architecture of your experienced reality at the level where that architecture is actually built. Sit or lie in a position where your spine is as comfortable as it can be. Take 3 slow, deliberate breaths, not the shallow breathing of ordinary waking consciousness, but the deep, diaphragmatic breathing that signals to your nervous system that it is safe to open, safe to receive, safe to lower the defensive walls that constant vigilance has kept erected around your most vulnerable places. With each exhale, feel the muscles of your face, your jaw, your shoulders releasing a layer of the chronic tension that most of us carry so constantly we have forgotten what its absence feels like. You are not going anywhere dangerous. You are going home. Now I want to begin building the visualization slowly, adding layers of sensory detail the way a painter adds layers of color, each one deepening the richness of the whole. Start with space. Imagine yourself standing in a place that your body associates with complete safety and expansion. It may be a place you have actually been, a specific landscape, a room, a threshold of some kind. It may be entirely imagined. What matters is not its geographical accuracy but its felt quality. Feel the air temperature on your skin. Notice whether there is sound, wind, water, the particular quality of silence that exists in spaces where something sacred has gathered over time. Let your feet feel the ground beneath them, solid and specific. This is not a vague dreamscape. This is a precise location in the field of your imagination, and you are going to return to it so many times that your nervous system will eventually recognize it as a second home. From this place of safety and expansion, I want you to invite forward the version of you that already lives in complete energetic alignment with your sovereign abundance. Not the future you, the timeless you, the one the quantum field has always known, the one the ancient wisdom traditions described as your essential nature beneath the accumulated layers of conditioning. Watch this version of you approach. Notice everything about the way they carry themselves, the quality of their movement, unhurried and completely at ease, the particular light in their eyes that comes not from excitement but from settledness, from the deep, unperformative confidence of someone who has stopped fighting the universe and started collaborating with it. Notice their hands, open, relaxed, neither grasping nor deflecting, positioned precisely as the hands of someone who has mastered the art of receiving without contracting and giving without depletion. As this version of you arrives beside you, I want you to notice that they are not a stranger. There is a recognition that moves through your body when they are near, Not the recognition of meeting someone new, but the recognition of encountering something you have always known, the way certain music strikes a chord in the chest that feels less like a new experience and more like a memory surfacing. This sovereign, abundant self carries a frequency that you can feel physically, a warmth, an expansion, a subtle but unmistakable loosening of the energetic compression that the wound and the conditioned identity have been generating in your field for years. Let yourself feel that warmth now. Let it move from the space between you and this figure into your own chest, your own hands, your own breath. This is not fantasy. This is attunement. You are calibrating your nervous system to a frequency it already knows how to hold. Now I want to take you deeper into the visualization. Your sovereign self reaches out and places one hand over your heart, and in that contact something extraordinary happens. You begin to receive, as a direct transmission rather than a description, the felt sense of your abundant reality. Not the logistics of it, not the specific numbers or circumstances. The felt sense. The quality of mornings when the first thought that arises is not anxiety but anticipation. The particular ease that moves through your body when you engage with your work and know, without calculation or performance, that your gifts have genuine value and that the world is organized to compensate that value abundantly. The specific texture of generosity, not the strained generosity of someone giving from an account they are worried about depleting, but the flowing, effortless generosity of someone giving from an ocean, knowing with complete certainty that what moves out will be replenished by the same infinite source that provided it. Feel the weight of financial fear leaving your body. This is the piece I want you to stay with for a moment, because it may be the most physically significant part of this entire visualization, the actual, somatic experience of putting down a weight you have been carrying for so long that you stopped noticing it as weight and started experiencing it as simply the normal density of being alive. Feel it releasing from your shoulders first, that chronic holding that manifests as tension between the shoulder blades, the physical signature of a nervous system braced against the possibility of loss. Feel it releasing from your solar plexus, that tight, slightly nauseated quality that arrives whenever the subject of money surfaces in a context of uncertainty. Feel it releasing from your jaw, your throat, the space behind your eyes. As it leaves, notice what fills the space it occupied, not emptiness, but warmth. Not the feverish warmth of excitement or the brittle warmth of forced optimism. The steady, radiating warmth of a body that has finally, in this moment, allowed itself to be held by the same abundance it has been working so hard to chase. Now your sovereign self speaks. And I want you to listen not with your analytical mind, but with the part of you that recognizes truth in the body before the brain has processed it. What they say is this: you were never without. The supply was always here. The ocean never ran dry. What happened was that you learned to stand at its edge with your back turned, working furiously to fill a bucket from a puddle, not knowing that behind you lay everything you could ever need. Turn around. It has always been here. It will always be here. You are not receiving something new. You are remembering something ancient. And the remembering is complete. Let those words settle into every layer of your body. Do not evaluate them. Do not immediately return to the practical world and test them against your current circumstances. Just let them be true in this moment, in this body, in this field. The nervous system is recording this. The subconscious is filing it. The architecture is being rewritten in real time. Before you gently return your awareness to the room around you, I want you to do one final thing in this visualization. I want you to make a commitment, not to me, not to any external authority, but to your sovereign self, who has been patient enough to wait through every year of the old story and generous enough to meet you here without a single word of reproach. The commitment is simple, and it does not need elaborate language. It is this: I choose to remember. From this moment forward, whenever the old frequency rises, Whenever the fear contracts, whenever the wound pulls, whenever the conditioned identity insists on its version of reality, I will remember this. I will remember the warmth. I will remember the open hands. I will remember that the ocean is behind me and it has never been anything other than full. Take a breath. Feel that commitment settle into your body like a stone finding its place at the bottom of clear water. Not dramatic, not effortful, simply right. Bring your awareness gently back into the room. Feel the specific weight and temperature of your physical body, the texture of what is beneath you, the sounds of the space around you. Carry with you the felt sense of what just happened, knowing that the subconscious does not distinguish between this and lived experience, and that what you have just done is not preparation for reprogramming but the reprogramming itself. You have just delivered new evidence to the deepest level of your operating system. You have shown it, in the only language it actually understands, sensation, image, emotional truth, what your sovereign reality feels and moves and breathes like. And it has received that evidence with the same neutral, comprehensive, permanent thoroughness with which it has received every other experience of your life. The sacred reprogramming is not a single session. It is a daily practice, and its power compounds the way interest compounds, invisibly in any given moment, unmistakably across time. Return to this visualization. Deepen it each time. Add details, add specificity, add the particular sensory textures of your personal abundant reality as they become clearer to you. And as you do, pay close attention to what begins to shift in your waking life. Not just the material circumstances, though those will shift, but the subtler movements first, the quality of your own inner voice, the speed with which you recover from setbacks, the nature of the ideas that surface in your quietest moments. These are the first signs that the architecture has genuinely changed. These are the indicators that the sovereign self is no longer a figure you visited in a visualization but a presence that is gradually, irreversibly, becoming the one who answers when the world calls your name. And that sovereign presence needs a voice. Not just the internal voice of committed identity but the external, spoken, world-facing language of someone who has claimed their place in the flow of divine supply. Because the words you use, with yourself, with others, about your work and your worth and your relationship to abundance, are not merely descriptions of your reality. They are instructions to the field. And that is exactly where we go next. Words are not decorative. I need to establish that immediately, because the culture we have grown up in treats language as fundamentally descriptive, as a tool for reporting on reality rather than participating in its creation. We use words to tell each other what has happened, what exists, what we think and feel and observe. And within that framework, the idea that the specific language you use about money, about your worth, about your relationship to abundance could have any meaningful effect on the actual material texture of your life sounds, at best, like poetic exaggeration and at worst like the kind of magical thinking that responsible adults are supposed to have outgrown. I am asking you to set that framework down for this chapter. Not permanently, you can pick it back up afterward if you choose. But just for the duration of what I am about to show you, I need you to entertain the possibility that the framework itself is the limitation. That language is not a mirror held up to reality but a chisel being applied to it, continuously, with every word you speak and every sentence you repeat and every story you tell about who you are and what you deserve and what the universe is likely to provide. The evidence for this is not exclusively mystical. The neuroscience of language is one of the most rapidly expanding fields in contemporary brain research, and what it is consistently finding should fundamentally alter the way every human being thinks about the words they use in ordinary conversation. When you speak a word, when you actually produce it, either aloud or in the silent inner monologue that runs almost continuously beneath your conscious awareness, your brain does not process it as an abstract symbol. It activates the same neural networks that would fire if you were actually experiencing the thing the word describes. The word lemon activates your salivary glands. The word danger activates your threat response system. The word abundance, spoken with genuine emotional inhabitation rather than mechanical repetition, activates the neural networks associated with expansion, safety, receptivity, and the particular quality of relaxed confidence that characterizes a nervous system in prosperity mode. Your brain does not know the difference between the word and the thing. It responds to both as if they are real, because at the neurological level, they both are. Now scale that understanding across a lifetime of language habits. If you have been using, for decades, the specific vocabulary of scarcity, the phrases that the wound installed in your linguistic repertoire before you were old enough to choose differently, then you have been delivering thousands of times per day neurological instructions that reinforce the frequency of lack. Phrases like, "I can't afford it," "Money is tight," "I'm terrible with finances," "Rich people are just lucky," "I never have enough." Each one of these, spoken in the offhand, habitual way that most of us use them, is not merely a description of a circumstance. It is an instruction. It is a signal sent simultaneously to your nervous system, your subconscious architecture, and, if we take seriously the quantum understanding we built in Chapter 3, to the field itself. And the field, as we have established, does not argue with you. It does not evaluate whether your assessment is accurate or fair or in your best interest. It simply matches the signal. It always, unfailingly, matches the signal. This is why I call language the most underestimated tool in the entire prosperity toolkit. Every other practice we have discussed, the frequency work, the wound clearing, the quantum architecture, the sovereign identity, the sacred reprogramming, all of it is supported or undermined, moment to moment across the ordinary texture of your day, by the specific words you choose. You can do the most powerful visualization practice in the world at 6 in the morning and then spend the rest of the day speaking the language of scarcity in every casual conversation, every internal monologue, every offhand comment about your finances or your worth, and the visualization will be fighting an uphill battle against the accumulated linguistic programming of every waking hour. The words are constant. The words are everywhere. The words are the most continuous, most pervasive, most available point of intervention in the entire system. I want to introduce you to what I call the prosperity language spectrum, a way of understanding the full range of linguistic choices available to you in any given moment and the dramatically different energetic signatures they carry. At one end of the spectrum is what I call scarcity language, the vocabulary of limitation, fear, and lack that most of us inherited without choosing. It is characterized by finality, "I can never," by self-diminishment, "someone like me," by the framing of abundance as belonging to a category of people that does not include you, and by the pervasive use of the word, but, as a mechanism for canceling every positive statement before it can take root. I am doing well, but I am worried about next month. Things are improving, but it never seems to last. The but is not a conjunction. It is an eraser. Everything before it is neutralized by everything after it, and the nervous system files the post-dash, but content as the real message. At the other end of the spectrum is what I call sovereign language, the vocabulary of someone who has claimed their identity as a conduit for divine supply and speaks from that identity as their natural home. Sovereign language is not relentlessly positive in the superficial, bypassing way that denies real challenges. It is something more sophisticated and more powerful than that. It is language that acknowledges difficulty without granting it authority. It is the difference between, "I am struggling financially right now," which grants the struggle the status of identity, of permanent characterization, and "I am in a period of transition, and I have navigated every transition before this one." The second statement is not less honest. It is more honest, because it includes the full truth of your history rather than only the truth of this moment. Sovereign language speaks from the long view, from the accumulated evidence of a life that has always, in the end, found a way through. Between these two ends of the spectrum lies what I call the language of becoming, the transitional vocabulary for people who are genuinely in the process of shifting their frequency but have not yet fully inhabited the sovereign identity, and who find that speaking as if they have already arrived feels dishonest in a way that creates its own resistance. The language of becoming is enormously powerful precisely because it honors both where you are and where you are moving. It sounds like this: I am learning to receive abundance with the same ease I bring to everything else I have mastered. I am building a relationship with prosperity that reflects my true capacity. Every day I understand more deeply that I am worthy of the supply that is already flowing toward me. These statements are honest, present tense, forward-leaning, and free of the desperate reaching quality that undermines conventional affirmations. They carry the frequency of genuine movement rather than wishful thinking, and the field responds to genuine movement with the same reliable elegance with which it responds to arrived certainty, perhaps more slowly, but just as surely. Now I want to address something that rarely gets discussed in this space with the directness it deserves, and that is the language you use about other people's abundance. Because the prosperity vocabulary is not only about how you speak about yourself. It is equally about how you speak about others who are living in the financial reality you desire. This is where the wound shows up most clearly in language, in the barely perceptible edge of resentment in the voice when discussing someone else's success, in the reflexive search for the flaw or the luck or the unfair advantage that explains why they have what you do not, in the habitual framing of the abundant lives of others as evidence against your own possibility rather than evidence for it. Every time you speak about another person's prosperity with resentment or dismissal, you are broadcasting to your own field a very specific signal. Abundance and people like me are in opposition. And the field, as always, simply confirms whatever you broadcast. The practice of what the ancient Hawaiian tradition calls ho'oponopono, and what virtually every mystical tradition expresses in its own vocabulary, is the deliberate, practiced cultivation of genuine appreciation for the abundance you observe in others. Not performed appreciation. Not the strained, teeth-gritting variety of positivity that secretly harbors the same resentment it pretends to have transcended. Genuine appreciation, rooted in the understanding that another person's abundance is not drawn from a finite pool that their prosperity diminishes for you, but is rather evidence of the infinite nature of the supply that is equally and completely available to you. When you see someone living in the financial reality you desire and your authentic response, cultivated through practice, not born overnight, is, yes, and that is available for me too, you have just broadcast one of the most powerful prosperity signals the human system is capable of generating. You have aligned yourself, in that moment, with the truth of infinite supply rather than the fiction of scarcity. Let me give you a specific linguistic practice to begin immediately, because this chapter demands action, not just understanding. For the next 7 days, I want you to conduct what I call the language audit. Carry a small notebook or use the notes application on your phone, whatever you will actually use consistently. Every time you catch yourself using scarcity language, either spoken aloud or in the internal monologue, write it down without judgment and then write the sovereign language or language of becoming equivalent beside it. You are not trying to suppress or deny the scarcity thought. You are training the habit of translation. Over time, and faster than you might expect, the translation happens automatically, and then faster still, the original scarcity phrasing stops arising at all, because the neural pathway that generated it has been systematically replaced by the more frequently traveled road of sovereign speech. Here is what the language audit will reveal to you, and I want to prepare you for this because it can be initially sobering. the volume of scarcity language running through an ordinary human consciousness on an ordinary day is staggering. Most of it is so automatic, so deeply habituated, that it does not feel like a choice at all. It feels like simply narrating reality. The work of the audit is not to shame you for the volume. It is to make visible what has been invisible, to bring into conscious awareness a pattern that has been operating beneath the threshold of observation, and in doing so to create the only thing that has ever created genuine change in any human system, the gap between stimulus and response in which choice becomes possible. The moment you can see the scarcity phrase before it leaves your mouth, you have already won half the battle. The sovereign response is right there, waiting, always available, always accurate, always more aligned with the truth of what you actually are than the old story ever was. And there is something else the language audit will show you, something that surprised me profoundly when I first committed to this practice and that has been confirmed by every person I have ever guided through it. The language shifts before the circumstances do. The shift in how you speak about your financial reality creates a shift in how your nervous system experiences it, which creates a shift in your frequency, which begins almost immediately to generate a different quality of circumstance, subtle at first, unmistakable over time. You will notice that conversations about money begin to feel different in your body. Less threatening, less loaded with the particular electrical charge of shame and fear that used to accompany them. You will notice that opportunities described in the language of abundance rather than the language of desperate need attract a qualitatively different response from the people around you. You will notice, perhaps most surprisingly of all, that you begin to think differently about what is possible. Not because anything in your external circumstances has yet confirmed the shift, but because the language you are using is already building the new architecture in your nervous system, and the nervous system is already transmitting the new frequency into the field. The language of prosperity is not separate from the reality of prosperity. It is one of its primary creative mechanisms. And as you begin to speak from sovereignty rather than from the wound, as the words you use start to reflect the ancient truth of your nature rather than the conditioned story of your limitations, you will find that the world begins to listen differently. Doors open in response to a different kind of knock. People lean forward rather than pulling back. Resources appear with a timing that seems almost conversational, as if the universe has simply been waiting for you to ask in the language it was always prepared to answer. But language, for all its extraordinary power, is only one dimension of the external expression of sovereign prosperity. There are forces operating beneath the surface of even the most carefully cultivated vocabulary, invisible leaks in the energetic system that drain the frequency of abundance as fast as it is generated, and that no amount of linguistic precision can fully compensate for if they remain unaddressed. These are the blocks that survive every other intervention, the final obstacles between the person who understands prosperity and the person who lives it without interruption. They are specific, they are identifiable, and they are exactly what we are going after in the next chapter. Because we have come too far and built too much together for anything to remain between you and the unstoppable flow that is your sovereign inheritance. We have built something extraordinary together across these chapters. The architecture is real, the foundations are cleared, the identity is claimed, the language is shifting, and yet I know, because I have walked this path myself and guided countless others through it, that there is a specific category of obstacle that survives all of this work. Not because it is stronger than everything we have built, but because it is subtler. It operates below the level of the practices we have established, beneath the threshold of the frequency work and the visualization and the linguistic reprogramming, in the place where the most deeply rooted patterns live, the ones that have been with you so long they no longer feel like patterns at all. They feel like personality. They feel like temperament. They feel like simply the way you are wired, the particular configuration of a self that is fundamentally, immovably you. And because they feel like identity rather than habit, the standard tools of intentional change tend to slide right off them. I call these the final blocks. There are 3 of them. Not 7, not 12, not an endless taxonomy of psychological obstacles that keeps you perpetually in the position of identifying problems rather than moving through them. 3. Specific, nameable, workable, but only if you are willing to look at them with the same unflinching honesty we brought to the wound work in Chapter 2. Because these blocks are not strangers. They are old companions. They have been with you through every previous attempt to create a different financial reality, watching from just below the surface as each effort plateaued and the old patterns reasserted themselves with a quiet inevitability that felt, every time, like confirmation that change was simply not possible for someone like you. It was not confirmation. It was these 3 blocks doing exactly what they were designed to do. And today we name them, which is the beginning of the end of their authority over your field. The first final block is what I call prosperity guilt, and it is perhaps the most insidious of the 3 because it masquerades as virtue. Prosperity guilt is the deep, often entirely unconscious conviction that your personal abundance comes at someone else's expense. It is the belief, absorbed from a culture that has deeply conflated wealth with exploitation and abundance with moral compromise, that to have more than enough is to be complicit in someone else having less. It shows up as the compulsive need to minimize your own financial progress when speaking with people you love who are struggling. It shows up as the self-sabotage that arrives precisely when abundance is within reach, the sudden inexplicable bad decision, the overlooked opportunity, the relationship drama that consumes your attention at the exact moment a breakthrough was imminent. It shows up as a subtle but devastating sense of disloyalty to your origins, as if fully stepping into prosperity would be a betrayal of the people and the community and the identity that shaped you, a declaration that you consider yourself better than or separate from the place you came from. I want to address this block with both honesty and compassion because it is rooted in something genuine, a real and laudable care for others, a real awareness of the inequities in the world, a real love for the people in your life whose material circumstances are difficult. None of that is wrong. None of that needs to change. What needs to change is the foundational error in the logic. The assumption that your abundance and someone else's abundance are drawing from the same finite pool, so that your having more necessarily means someone else having less. This is the scarcity model of wealth, and it is not only emotionally crippling, it is factually incorrect. Value is not a fixed quantity being redistributed among a fixed population. It is created. It is generated. It expands. Every human being who has ever stepped fully into their sovereign capacity and expressed their gifts at the highest level has created value in the world that did not exist before them, value that ripples outward, that employs, that inspires, that solves problems, that generates resources that flow through entire communities. Your abundance is not extracted from the world. It is contributed to it. And the prosperity guilt that keeps you small does not protect anyone. It simply adds one more constricted frequency to a field that is desperately in need of people willing to demonstrate what fully expressed, sovereignly inhabited abundance looks like. The second final block is arrival anxiety, the paradoxical fear of actually achieving the thing you have been working toward. This one is rarely discussed because it seems, on the surface, to make no sense. Why would anyone be afraid of the very outcome they desire? But the nervous system does not operate on the logic of desire. It operates on the logic of familiarity, of the known versus the unknown, of the predictable discomfort of current circumstances versus the unpredictable territory of a genuinely different reality. The identity you have built across decades of navigating your current financial circumstances, however uncomfortable, however far from what you want, is at least known. You know who you are in it. You know how to navigate it. You know what to expect from it. The abundant reality, for all its desirability, is unknown territory. And the nervous system's relationship with unknown territory is not governed by how much you want it. It is governed by whether it has been made familiar, which is precisely what the visualization work in Chapter 6 was designed to accomplish, and why the consistent repetition of that practice is not optional if you are serious about crossing the threshold. Arrival anxiety shows up in the specific behaviors of people who get close to financial breakthrough and then find ways that seem entirely circumstantial and entirely logical in the moment to pull back from the edge. The investment that is almost made and then reconsidered. The opportunity that is almost seized and then overthought into paralysis. The relationship with a mentor or a partner that would genuinely accelerate the trajectory, declined because of a reason that sounds reasonable but feels, in the body, like relief, the particular relief of someone who has just narrowly avoided something terrifying rather than someone who has made a wise decision. If you recognize these patterns in your own history, and most honest people do, I want you to understand something crucial. The anxiety was never about the decision in front of you. It was about the unfamiliarity of the territory on the other side of it. The antidote is not to force yourself through the fear with willpower. It is to make the abundant reality so familiar, through consistent visualization and language practice and sovereign identity work, that crossing into it eventually feels less like a leap into the unknown and more like coming home. The third final block is perhaps the most universally human of the three, and the one that requires the most ongoing vigilance because it never fully disappears. It simply becomes less powerful as the sovereign identity strengthens. I call it reciprocity debt, the deeply embedded social programming that makes receiving feel dangerous unless it is immediately balanced by giving. We are, at the biological level, reciprocal creatures. The social bonding mechanisms of every human culture on Earth are organized around the exchange of favors, the balancing of obligations, the maintenance of relational equity that prevents any single individual from becoming too indebted to another. This is not pathological. It is the sophisticated social technology of a species that survived through cooperation. But when this reciprocity programming is applied to the relationship between a human being and the universe, when the infinite ocean of divine supply is related to as if it were a human benefactor whose generosity creates an obligation that must be immediately and proportionally repaid, the result is a systematic inability to receive fully, freely, and without the anxious compulsion to immediately give it away before it can generate the discomfort of feeling owed. Reciprocity debt shows up as the person who immediately deflects every compliment, who cannot simply say, "Thank you," and let the acknowledgement land, but must immediately diminish it or redirect it or turn it into a compliment for the person who offered it. It shows up as the inability to receive help without profound discomfort, the reflexive insistence on handling everything independently that gets reframed as self-sufficiency but is actually, at its root, the terror of being in someone's debt. And most relevantly for our work here, it shows up as the compulsive spending of money the moment it arrives, the inability to allow abundance to accumulate, to let the ocean fill the vessel rather than immediately emptying it back out, because accumulation feels dangerous in a nervous system programmed to believe that having more than you immediately need creates a debt that the universe will eventually come to collect. The practice for dissolving reciprocity debt is one of the most counterintuitive and most immediately powerful in this entire body of work. It is the practice of receiving, deliberately, consciously, with full embodied presence, without immediately giving anything back. It begins with small things. When someone offers you a compliment today, I want you to receive it completely. Feel it land. Let it be true. Say thank you without qualification, without deflection, without the reflexive gesture of returning it before you have actually allowed yourself to have it. Notice everything that arises in your body in that moment. The discomfort, the urge to minimize, the sense of imbalance that your reciprocity programming generates when you do not immediately level the exchange. Breathe into that discomfort rather than acting on it. You are retraining the nervous system's relationship with receiving, one small moment at a time, and the neurological pathway you are building in these small moments is the same pathway through which the larger abundance must travel when it arrives. Here is where all three blocks connect to something I want you to feel in your body right now, because intellectual understanding of these patterns is not sufficient. The body must be involved in the dissolving. Place your hands in your lap, palms facing upward. Open them completely. Feel the physical sensation of open, upward-facing palms, the vulnerability of that posture, the way it is the exact physical opposite of grasping and clutching and defending. In virtually every spiritual tradition on earth, this is the posture of receiving, of a self that has dropped the armor, released the grip, and made itself available to the flow that is always, perpetually, abundantly present. Feel what it is like to hold this posture for a full minute without closing the hands. Notice the resistance. Notice the almost gravitational pull toward closing, toward protecting, toward the defensive configuration that the wound installed and that the final blocks maintain. And then stay open anyway. Not forever, just for this minute. Just to show your nervous system that open hands do not result in destruction. That receiving does not create an unbearable debt. That the universe does not punish the vessel that allows itself to be filled. This is the deepest level of the work. This is the territory that most prosperity teaching skips entirely because it is unglamorous and requires a patience and a self-compassion that the culture of instant transformation has no framework for. But this is also where the most permanent, most structural change happens, in the quiet, repeated, undramatic practice of catching the final blocks in their operation and choosing, one moment at a time, the sovereign response instead. The guilt met with the truth of infinite supply. The arrival anxiety met with the familiarity of the visualized abundant reality. The reciprocity debt met with the practiced, embodied, increasingly natural act of simply, completely, gratefully receiving. And this leads us directly to something I promised you from the beginning of our journey together, the practical daily architecture that sustains everything we have built. Because transformation without maintenance is renovation without foundation. The frequency must be tended. The sovereign identity must be fed. The quantum field must be engaged with the same consistency and deliberateness as any other relationship that matters to you. What I am about to share in the next chapter is not a supplement to the inner work. It is the inner work expressed as daily life. The protocol through which everything we have uncovered and cleared and built together becomes not an extraordinary state you visit occasionally, but the ordinary baseline of a life lived in unstoppable, sovereign, golden rain abundance. This is where the philosophy becomes practice. This is where the practice becomes identity. This is where the identity becomes reality. There is a difference between transformation and installation. Everything we have done together across these chapters has been transformation work. The clearing, the reprogramming, the identity claiming, the block dissolving, the linguistic rewiring of a system that had been running on the old code for decades. That work is real and it is permanent in the way that any genuine excavation is permanent. You cannot unsee what you have seen, cannot unfeel what you have allowed yourself to finally feel, cannot return the wound to its comfortable invisibility once you have looked at it honestly in the full light of sovereign awareness. The transformation has happened. But transformation without installation is like renovating a house and never moving in. The new architecture exists. The question is whether you will inhabit it daily, consistently, with the kind of devoted attention that turns a beautiful structure into a lived home, into the place your nervous system recognizes as normal, as expected, as simply the way things are. The Golden Rain Protocol is the installation. It is the daily practice architecture through which everything we have built together becomes not an elevated state you occasionally access, but the ground floor of your ordinary experience. I have spent years refining this protocol, through my own practice, through the observation of what actually produces lasting frequency shifts versus what produces temporary highs followed by the gravitational pullback toward the old baseline. What I have found, consistently and without exception, is that the practices which create permanent change are not the dramatic ones. They are not the weekend retreats or the peak experiences or the single breakthrough sessions, however genuinely powerful those can be. The practices that permanently install a new frequency are the ones that are simple enough to do every single day, specific enough to engage the nervous system rather than merely the intellect, and connected enough to the deeper emotional truth of your sovereign identity to generate genuine felt experience rather than mechanical repetition. The protocol has 5 elements, and I want to describe each one with enough specificity that you can begin tomorrow morning, not next week, not when the circumstances feel more conducive, not after you have read more or prepared more or become more worthy of the practice. Tomorrow morning, because the sovereign self does not wait for perfect conditions. It creates them. The first element is what I call the dawn declaration, and it happens before anything else enters your consciousness on any given morning. Before the phone, before the news, before the email and the notifications and the 1,000 small demands that the external world immediately begins placing on your attention the moment you signal your availability. The dawn declaration is 60 seconds, no more, no less, of spoken sovereign language delivered to the field before the conditioned mind has fully re-engaged its familiar patterns. You speak it aloud, because the vibration of your own voice carries a frequency that silent internal language does not. The specific words matter less than the emotional authenticity with which they are delivered. But here is the declaration I want you to begin with, and to make your own over time as the sovereign identity deepens and clarifies. I am open. I am aligned. The divine supply that has always been prepared for me flows freely and fully into every area of my life today. I receive with ease. I give with joy. I trust the field. I am the frequency of unstoppable prosperity. 60 seconds. Every morning. The consistency of this practice across 30 days will produce changes in your baseline frequency that a single 2-hour workshop cannot match, because the nervous system learns through repetition far more than through intensity. The second element is the gratitude calibration, and I want to distinguish this sharply from the generic gratitude practice that has become so ubiquitous in wellness culture that it has, for many people, lost its genuine energetic potency and become another item on a checklist. The gratitude calibration is not a list. Lists engage the analytical mind, and the analytical mind processes gratitude as information rather than as frequency. The gratitude calibration is a felt experience, the deliberate, specific, sensorially inhabited remembering of 3 moments from your recent past in which supply arrived. Not 3 things you are grateful for in the abstract. 3 specific moments, with texture, with temperature, with the precise emotional quality of the experience of receiving. The unexpected check that arrived when the account was low. The conversation with a stranger that opened a door you had not known existed. The idea that arrived at 3 in the morning with the particular quality of something delivered rather than generated. Re-inhabit each one fully, for 30 seconds each, not as a memory being reviewed but as a present experience being relived. Your nervous system, as we established, does not distinguish between memory and present experience when both are inhabited with genuine emotional specificity. You are not remembering supply. You are experiencing it again now, and adding that experience to the accumulated evidence that the field has always provided and always will. The third element is what I call the prosperity pulse, a 2-minute body-based practice that directly addresses the somatic dimension of frequency that purely cognitive approaches cannot reach. Stand if you are able. Feel your feet on the ground, not metaphorically, but literally, with enough attention that you can feel the specific texture and temperature and pressure of whatever surface is beneath you. This is your physical connection to the earth, and the earth has been generating abundance continuously for 4.5 billion years without a single moment of scarcity anxiety. Let that land. Then place both hands over your heart, not lightly, with real pressure, enough that you can feel the warmth of your palms through your clothing, and take 5 slow, deliberate breaths in which the exhale is twice as long as the inhale. This specific breathing pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the branch of your autonomic nervous system associated with rest, receptivity, and the physiological state of safety. You cannot broadcast the frequency of prosperity from a nervous system locked in threat response. The prosperity pulse is the physiological switch that moves you, in 2 minutes, from the contracted state of vigilance into the expanded state of genuine receptivity. It is the body preparing itself to receive the golden rain rather than bracing against it. The fourth element is the field investment, and this is the element that most directly engages the quantum architecture we built in Chapter 3. The field investment is a 10-minute daily practice of what I call inhabited visualization, the specific, sensorially rich, emotionally authentic building of your abundant reality in the imagination with enough detail and enough felt presence that the subconscious files it as evidence. We began this work in the sacred reprogramming chapter, and now it becomes a daily practice rather than a single session. Each day, spend 10 minutes inhabiting your sovereign abundant reality with as much specificity as you can generate. The key word is inhabited, not watched from a distance like a movie, but lived from the inside, with the full sensory engagement of a body that is actually there. What does the air feel like in that reality? What are the sounds? What is the quality of the light? What does it feel like in your chest when you open your account and the number reflects your sovereign worth? What does it feel like in your hands when you sign the agreement, close the deal, receive the resource, make the gift? The more sensorially specific the visualization, the more convincingly the subconscious accepts it as memory, and the more powerfully it reorganizes your baseline frequency around that new evidence. The fifth element is the evening integration, the bookend practice that closes the day with the same intentional frequency management that opened it. The evening integration has 2 parts. The first is the evidence collection, a brief 2 to 3 minute review of every moment during the day in which supply moved in your direction, however small. The parking space that opened at the precise moment you needed it. The email that arrived with an opportunity you had not solicited. The conversation that shifted in a direction that created unexpected value. The idea, the connection, the resource, the moment of clarity, all of it is supply, and all of it is evidence, and the practice of deliberately collecting that evidence at the end of each day is training your perception to see abundance where it previously saw only the ordinary texture of life. Perception trained to see abundance creates a nervous system that expects abundance, and a nervous system that expects abundance broadcasts the frequency of abundance into the field, and the field responds by generating more of what is expected. The cycle is self-reinforcing in exactly the direction you want, once you prime the pump with the deliberate, daily act of looking for what is already here. The second part of the evening integration is the release. 30 seconds of deliberate, conscious letting go of everything from the day that carried the frequency of lack, fear, or contraction. Not analysis. Not processing. Not rehearsing tomorrow's worries or cataloging today's shortcomings. Simply a conscious exhale, literal and metaphorical simultaneously, in which you release the day's scarcity signals back into the field to be composted, transformed, returned as the raw material of tomorrow's abundance. Many spiritual traditions have a version of this practice. The Catholic examination of conscience, the Jewish practice of Cheshbon Hanefesh, the Buddhist practice of dedicating the merit of the day's actions. All of them share the same underlying technology, the deliberate, conscious closing of the day's energetic accounts so that you enter sleep, and the extraordinarily powerful subconscious processing that happens during sleep, from a cleared, settled, sovereignty-affirming baseline rather than from the accumulated residue of the day's fears. These 5 elements together, dawn declaration, gratitude calibration, prosperity pulse, field investment, evening integration, constitute the complete Golden Rain Protocol. In total, they require approximately 15 to 18 minutes of your day. Not an hour, not a retreat weekend. 15 to 18 minutes, distributed across morning and evening, that will do more to permanently install the frequency of sovereign abundance than any amount of sporadic, intense practice ever could. Because the nervous system learns through consistency. The subconscious reorganizes through repetition. The quantum field responds to a coherent signal sustained over time with a reliability and a specificity that will eventually stop surprising you, not because it has become less miraculous, but because it has become expected, normal, the natural result of a system operating exactly as it was always designed to operate when the blocks are cleared and the frequency is aligned and the sovereign self is finally, fully, inhabiting the life it was always meant to live. I want to address something directly before we move to our final chapter, because I know it will arise in the minds of some of you reading this with the honest, practical intelligence that you bring to everything important in your life. You will wonder, at some point in the first days of this protocol, whether it is working. You will look at your circumstances and find them largely unchanged, and the conditioned mind, which is not unintelligent, merely limited, will begin to generate its familiar argument, that this is fantasy, that the real world does not operate this way, that you were foolish to invest your hope in something so intangible. I want to tell you exactly what to do when that argument arises, because it will arise, and how you respond to it in those first weeks is the single most important determinant of whether the protocol installs permanently or becomes another attempt that almost worked. Do not argue with the mind. Do not try to convince it with logic that the protocol is working, because logic is the mind's home territory and it will win that argument every time. Instead, return your attention to the body. Place your hands over your heart. Take the 5 breaths of the prosperity pulse. And ask yourself one question, not about your bank account or your circumstances or the timeline of your expected results. Ask yourself this: does my body feel different than it did 30 days ago? Is there less of the chronic contraction, the baseline anxiety, the specific heaviness of a nervous system carrying the weight of inherited scarcity? If the answer is yes, even slightly, even partially, then the protocol is working. The body changes before the circumstances do. The frequency shifts before the material reality catches up. Trust the body. Trust the process. Trust the ancient, unstoppable, sovereign intelligence that has been waiting your entire life for you to give it 15 minutes a day. And now we arrive at the place this entire journey has been building toward. Not an ending, a threshold. The most consequential single moment in this entire body of work, the one that determines whether everything we have built together becomes a beautiful intellectual and spiritual experience that gradually fades, or whether it becomes the permanent, lived, material reality of a sovereign life in unstoppable flow. The moment of commitment, the irreversible decision, the threshold that, once crossed, changes the trajectory of everything that follows with the quiet, permanent, world-altering force of a single degree of course correction held consistently across 1,000 miles of ocean. Everything we have built together across this journey has been leading here. Not to information, you have always had access to information. Not to inspiration. Inspiration has visited you before and you know its beautiful, temporary quality, the way it burns bright and then dims against the persistent gravity of the ordinary. What this entire architecture has been building toward is something categorically different from both of those things. It has been building toward a decision, a specific, conscious, irreversible turning of the self toward its own sovereign nature, not as a concept to be admired from a distance but as a lived reality to be inhabited completely, beginning not tomorrow, not after the circumstances improve, not after you feel ready, but in the precise, unrepeatable, eternally available now of this present moment. I want to talk about the nature of real commitment, because the word has been so thoroughly domesticated by self-help culture that it has lost the weight it needs to carry for what we are about to do together. In the vocabulary of contemporary personal development, commitment tends to mean intention, a sincere wish to behave differently, backed by a genuine feeling of motivation that exists at the moment of declaration and is tested by every ordinary Tuesday that follows. That kind of commitment is valuable. It is not nothing. But it is not what I am describing here, and the distinction matters enormously for what happens next in your life. Real commitment, the kind that permanently alters the trajectory of a human life, is not primarily an emotional event. It is a structural one. It is the moment when the self reorganizes around a new center of gravity with enough completeness that returning to the old configuration becomes genuinely impossible, not because the old patterns have been destroyed but because the new identity has become more real, more inhabited, more fundamentally you than the conditioned self ever was. Think of the most significant commitments in your life, the ones that actually held, the ones that genuinely changed the direction of your story. They did not hold because the feeling of motivation never wavered. Feelings always waver. They held because something shifted in the architecture of your identity at the moment of commitment. Something that made the committed path feel more like home than the uncommitted one, even on the days when it was harder, even in the seasons when the harvest was not yet visible above the ground. That architectural shift is what we are creating right now. And unlike every previous chapter, which required you to understand and feel and practice, this chapter requires only one thing: the willingness to cross the threshold that has been here, waiting, since the first word of this journey. I want to speak directly to the part of you that is hesitating, not with frustration, with recognition. Because I know exactly what that hesitation feels like from the inside, and I know that it is not weakness or lack of faith or insufficient desire for the life you want. The hesitation is the final, most sophisticated defense of the conditioned self, the identity that has kept you safe within its limitations for so long that it genuinely believes its own survival and yours are the same thing. It will offer you 100 reasonable-sounding arguments for why now is not quite the right moment. It will point to the unresolved circumstances, the incomplete preparations, the lingering doubts that it will frame as wisdom rather than fear. It will suggest that a little more work, a little more understanding, a little more evidence that this is real before you give yourself to it fully, surely that is the prudent path. I want you to hear those arguments with compassion, because they come from a place that genuinely loved you in the only way it knew how. And then I want you to make the commitment anyway, not in spite of the fear, through it. Because the sovereign self does not wait for fear to be absent. It moves forward with fear present, and in that movement, fear gradually loses the authority it never actually had. Here is what the commitment looks like in practice, because I refuse to leave it in the abstract when the concrete is available. The commitment is not a feeling. It is a series of actions, small, immediate, specific, that signal to your nervous system, your subconscious, and the quantum field simultaneously that the decision has been made and the new architecture is now the operating reality. The first action is this. Beginning tomorrow morning, you will execute the Golden Rain Protocol without negotiation. Not when you feel ready. Not when the circumstances are supportive. Every morning, every evening, for 30 consecutive days. Not because 30 days is a magic number, but because 30 days of consistent practice is approximately what it takes for a new neural pathway to achieve the degree of automaticity that makes it self-sustaining, the point at which the practice no longer requires willpower to initiate because it has become part of the identity that generates the behavior naturally, the way a musician no longer decides to practice scales but simply does, because that is who they are. The second action is the language commitment, the decision, made now and renewed daily, to conduct the language audit we discussed in Chapter 7 with the seriousness of someone who understands that their words are not describing their reality but creating it. This does not mean perfect linguistic sovereignty from day one. It means catching the scarcity language, translating it, and returning to sovereign speech with the same matter-of-fact consistency with which you would correct the steering of a car that had drifted slightly from its lane. No drama, no self-criticism, no elaborate processing of why you slipped. Simply the correction and the return and the quiet accumulation of sovereign speech across the ordinary moments of ordinary days until it becomes the most natural thing in the world to speak from the truth of what you are rather than the fiction of what you were told. The third action requires the most courage of the three, which is why I have saved it for last. I want you to identify, specifically, not vaguely, one area of your financial life in which you have been operating from the conditioned identity rather than the sovereign one. One area where the wound is still writing the story, where the final blocks are still managing the behavior, where the language has been consistently that of scarcity rather than sovereignty. It might be the way you price your work, the chronic undercharging that is not humility but prosperity guilt in professional clothing. It might be the investment you have been postponing for years out of arrival anxiety dressed as prudence. It might be the resource, the help, the support you have refused to receive because reciprocity debt made the receiving feel more dangerous than the struggling. Whatever it is, I want you to name it, write it down, speak it aloud, bring it from the comfortable darkness of the unexamined into the clear, workable light of sovereign awareness. And then I want you to take one action, not a complete overhaul, not a dramatic gesture, one specific, concrete, sovereign action in that area within the next 24 hours. One action that your conditioned self would not have taken. One action that is native to the identity you have been building across these chapters. One action that says to every level of your being, from the quantum field to the cellular biology to the conscious mind. The decision has been made. The sovereign self is not coming. It is here. Now I want to speak to you about something that lives beyond the protocol, beyond the practices, beyond the language and the visualization and the block-dissolving work. Something that is harder to name but more important than any of the specific techniques we have covered. It is the quality of relationship you have with your own becoming. Because the sovereign abundant life is not a destination you arrive at and then maintain through discipline and vigilance. It is a living, dynamic, continuously deepening relationship with the most fundamental truth of your nature, the truth that you are not a finite being operating in a universe of scarce resources, clawing for your share of a fixed supply. You are a consciousness of infinite creative capacity, embedded in a field of infinite generative abundance, temporarily wearing the costume of a particular human life in a particular historical moment. And that life, that moment, that specific and unrepeatable intersection of time and identity and circumstance is exactly and precisely the right vehicle for the expression of your sovereign prosperity. The relationship with your own becoming requires a quality that I want to name very carefully because it is so often confused with its pale imitation. The quality is patience, not the passive, resigned, waiting for something to happen patience of someone who has given up on being an active participant in their own reality. The active patience of a farmer. The farmer does not stand in the field every morning demanding to know why the harvest has not yet appeared. The farmer understands, at a cellular level that no amount of argument can dislodge, that the planting and the harvest are separated by a season of invisible growth, that the work happening beneath the surface of the ground is not less real for being invisible, not less productive for being silent, not less certain for being unverifiable by the impatient eye that wants to see results before the process has been given the time it requires to complete itself. You have planted. You have cleared the ground. You have tended the field with the practices and the identity work and the frequency cultivation that this entire journey has provided. The growth is happening. It is happening right now, beneath the surface of the circumstances that your conditioned mind is impatiently scrutinizing for evidence. Trust the farmer's patience. The harvest is already determined by the quality of the planting. I want to do one final thing with you before this chapter closes. One last practice that is also a seal, a completion, a formal acknowledgement between you and the field that the work of this journey has been received and the commitment has been made. I want you to take a breath, full, slow, deliberate, the breath of someone who has arrived somewhere important. And in the space of that breath, I want you to feel, not think, feel, the full accumulated weight of everything you have moved through in these chapters. The frequency work and the wound clearing and the ancient wisdom and the sovereign identity and the language reprogramming and the block dissolving and the protocol installation. Feel all of it as a single, integrated, living thing. Not a collection of techniques but a coherent transformation, a genuine shift in the architecture of who you are and how you move through the world. Let it settle into your body the way the final piece of a mosaic settles into place. Not adding something foreign but completing something that was always there, always the design, always the image that was being assembled from the fragments of every experience, every practice, every honest and courageous moment of this journey. Now make your declaration, not yours. In your own words, from the sovereign self that has been present through every chapter of this work, looking out through your eyes at a world that is about to become the external reflection of an internal reality that has already fundamentally changed. Whatever words arise, let them come. Speak them aloud if you are alone. Write them if speaking feels too exposed. Hold them in the body with the full weight of your intentional presence if neither speaking nor writing is available to you right now. The medium matters less than the authenticity. The field reads the signal, not the format. And the signal you are sending in this moment, the coherent, specific, emotionally inhabited signal of a sovereign human being who has done the deep work and made the irreversible decision and stepped across the threshold into the life that was always prepared for them, that signal is one of the most powerful things a human consciousness is capable of generating. The ancient ones built temples to the moment you are in right now. The quantum field organizes itself around it. The harvest of the soul begins with it. You are not the same person who arrived at the beginning of this journey. Something has genuinely changed, not because of anything I have said, but because of what you were willing to meet in yourself across these chapters. The willingness to look honestly at the wound. The courage to claim the sovereign identity before the circumstances confirmed it. The discipline to imagine a different kind of honest language. The vulnerability to open the hands, to dissolve the guilt and the anxiety and the reciprocity debt, to commit to a daily practice that treats your own frequency as the sacred, consequential, world-altering thing it actually is. That willingness, that courage, that discipline, that vulnerability, those are not things I gave you. They were always yours. I simply helped you remember where you had put them down. The golden rain is falling. It has always been falling. And you, sovereign, unstoppable, ancient in your knowing and new in your claiming, you are finally, completely, irrevocably standing in it. Go build the life that has been waiting for you. The journey is complete. If this transmission has shifted something in you, declare your commitment in the comments, not for me, but as a signal to the field and a gift to every person who reads your words and finds in them the permission they needed to begin their own sovereign journey.